Roberto Rodriguez currently serves as the Assistant Secretary of Planning, Evaluation, and Policy Development at the U.S. Department of Education. The Office of Planning, Evaluation, and Policy Development, OPEPD, advises the Secretary on all matters relating to policy development, implementation, and review. Most recently, Assistant Secretary Rodriguez served as President and CEO of Teach Plus, where he built an equity-driven teacher leadership movement that engaged thousands of teachers to shape public policy and instructional practice to deliver greater opportunity for students. He also led efforts at the White House to shape and implement President Obama's education agenda, serving on the Domestic Policy Council as Deputy Assistant to the President for the duration of the Obama administration. His efforts led to an increase of tens of thousands of additional children enrolled in preschool and childcare, new partnerships to better personalize and redesign the high school experience to meet individual needs of students, creation of a new national focus on excellence in STEM education, and an expansion of the Pell Grant to boost participation in higher education. A Michigan native, Assistant Secretary Rodriguez holds a bachelor's from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and a Master of Education from the Harvard Graduate School of Education. So I will let you take it away, Elena. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Raven. You're getting applause and you haven't said anything yet. So
thank you for the great introduction. That's applause for the great introduction. That was a long version, so thank you all for hanging in with that.
So thank you for being here. And I know everybody's excited to hear a lot of the comments that you have about what's happening at the department, what's happening in your work. But I want to backtrack for a minute and let everybody get to know you a little bit. So let's go back to just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this work, and maybe even, if you can, characterize what is the work that you do now? What is the planning,
OPPD.
Evaluation, policy development?
Yes, thanks, Elena, and I'm just thrilled to be here. Thank you for the chance to be with you, and it's wonderful to be in this space together. I hope you guys have had a wonderful opportunity to learn and grow and connect and exchange with one another. I was reflecting on my way up here, and New America has always been such a fantastic organization, really helping to lead the conversation and the idea generation around public policy and change on so many fronts here in Washington. And I've been here in my career doing this work for well over 20 years on education policy. But it is wonderful to be here at New America and in this space together again, particularly as we emerge from the pandemic. So thanks to each of you for making the trip, for engaging, for connecting, for coming together. Thank you, Elena, for the invitation and the whole team. So a little bit about me. I am really honored to serve as Assistant Secretary for Policy. That's kind of my shorthand. At the Department of Education, and as Raven mentions, my team and I help to guide our policy priorities and our policy development of our agenda across the administration, from early childhood there at the department all the way through to adult education, and we work to connect and work closely hand in hand with our colleagues at the White House to fulfill President Biden's vision and his commitments to the work around building a more equitable system. We have worked to manage and develop our budget at the department and to do more to integrate and support our colleagues as they administer our programs across the government in education. It is one of the most important times in our system. Right, I don't have to remind each of you of that as we emerge from this pandemic, the recovery and the restarting of our schools, going from 46% of our schools open to 100% today has been priority 1, 2, and 3 for us within the Biden administration since day one. But we are also endeavoring to close and chart a new vision for more boldly addressing our opportunity and achievement gaps in our system. We are working to advance a vision to cultivate and build and support diverse, talented, and thriving teaching workforce in our schools as the single most important component that we believe we can give our learners today. We are working to chart a new vision to re-envision our schools and support the whole child and the comprehensive needs of our kids, particularly as those mental health needs are greater now more than ever. We're trying to do more to support stronger pathways to and through our higher education system and address college affordability and attainment for more of our students. Exciting opportunities to redesign our high schools so that we are engaging our young people earlier in those conversations around what comes next and about their future, giving them more agency to shape their future, and connect that more actively with what they'll need to succeed in college and in careers, and doing more to foster interagency work on every front, right, as we uphold our civil rights laws at the department, as we work to advance important opportunities to grow community college access and success with our colleagues at the Department of Labor, as we work to grow our early childhood system and access to preschool for our youngest learners with our colleagues at the Health and Human Services Department. So I have a long career that I bring on education policy to this, including working for former President Obama, which I loved all 8 years of my time in the White House with Senator Kennedy on the Senate Help Committee. But most importantly, I'm the son of public school educators, and early on in my career, growing up in my youth, growing up in Michigan, I think that was when my commitment to equity and to advocating for equity and for excellence for all of our learners in our communities. That's where it really began. It was shaped by my own journey and my own experience, even though I probably couldn't have voiced it at the time or known it at the time. But that led me here to DC and to work on and to have the honor to work under such great mentors over the course of my career.
Thanks. So appreciate that, all of that. It's interesting because for those of you who don't know this, I'm married to a public school teacher, but I actually grew up here. My parents are federal bureaucrats in the Department of Labor, so I grew up sliding down those halls of Perkins. That's the U.S. Department of Labor's building. And so swore off working for a federal agency at that time because my experience with my parents was that I didn't want to do that. But I have tremendous respect for it, and I know how difficult it can be, the importance of a federal agency, what has to happen to move something forward, how slow things can be, how difficult it can be, and how you need to respond both to what's urgent in the moment, and also what are long-standing goals of a nation or a federal agency or an administration as well. So we're in a time now, you and I were just talking about this, where we have a real crisis around teacher shortages, just to put it at that. There are a lot of crises, but there's a crisis around teacher shortages at the same time that we've been, for a long time, folks here and elsewhere have been trying to build a stronger educator workforce that is more diverse, more reflective of our students. Could you give us a sense of where the department is and what we might expect the department to do moving forward to address both of those?
Absolutely. Well, we'll continue to prioritize this, right? I don't think, as I often said, and I chose to re-enter public service because I cared so deeply about the work to strengthen and support our public education system, but also because, I felt like we were in this unique moment, and having served on the transition and coming from 3 years of leading and building a movement of teacher leaders across 12 states at Teach Plus, I really carried the aspirations and the vision of what the profession could and should be, for more what that living example should be, that both does justice to the tremendous public service that our teachers perform every day, for what they bring and to their classrooms and to their students' learning every day, but also for what it should be, for our vision for what this profession should be moving forward. And so for me, coming into it's a very personal thing, because coming into the administration, I saw just how high a priority President Obama and our secretary, who's actually in New York this morning, was speaking to the importance of building stronger pre-service pathways to and through the profession and supporting compensation for our teachers. Just how high a priority this had within the agenda, right? And you mentioned the long game, Elena, which is what we have to play here. It is not a matter of like overnight, in a year or 2 or 3, being able to address what we saw before this pandemic coming down the line. We had 900,000 fewer teacher candidates over an 11-year period leading up to the pandemic than we did previously. We knew that our teachers were paying a wage gap by choosing this profession, right? Earning 82 cents on every dollar that their peers coming out of college might be able to earn. In too many states, still, veteran teachers who are the heads of their household qualifying for 2 or more public assistance benefits, or having to hold down, 1 or 2 jobs just to be able to put, and you saw the whole movement across the country prior to this administration that tied across 12 states, red states and blue states, where teachers were lifting their voices and saying, it's time for us to prioritize and invest more in our public education system and in our teaching workforce, right? That Red for Ed movement that we saw. And we saw some state legislators begin to respond to that, and too often I think that was a very modest 2 or 3% increase in pay. But it's not just the compensation piece, right? The long game here has to be also thinking about how we are going deeper in how we think about that pre-service and that pathway into the profession. How are we preparing our young people to enter teaching ready for success and ready at least to grow and learn and prove themselves those first 5 years in the classroom, which we know are critical to their ability to be able to stay. It's not to say that anybody's going to be a great teacher on day 1, right? But if we're investing in that mentorship and that induction and that support, and then growing those pathways in the profession so that for our teachers that have been in their classrooms, for their voice to be able to carry beyond those 4 walls, to distribute that leadership, to provide opportunities for leadership and advancement alongside their principals, so that we don't have a one-size-fits-all profession, because we know that this next generation of teachers isn't going to elect to come into a profession that's going to limit their voice and their ability and their leadership potential to thrive. And if you think about how we learn as professionals in the work that we do every day, it is in community and in fellowship with one another. And then we have to think about all of the current political climate, and we were just talking about this before today's conversation, that our teachers are facing, the tremendous amount of scrutiny, the tremendous challenges around, our teachers know how to value, see, hear, and lift and affirm their students. We have to trust them and honor them to do that, right? And we have to bring this kind of political scrutiny out of that equation so that we can support them in that work. So this is why what you're doing is really important, because your grow your own programs, those are, the foundation of that work is about building community alongside building our future teachers.
Yeah, so that's helpful. And I want to put a point in that about GYO being not just a response to teacher shortages, not just a way to develop a more
culturally, racially, and linguistically diverse educator workforce, but also about community development. I mean, the folks here in all of our conversations, and of course we've now been together now for a year and a half or more. The heart of it is to do all of that. Is that you're trying to help support and build the whole community through those people who are coming up and becoming teachers. That's not easy to do, and everybody here will say the celebration of we've graduated 15, we've graduated 12, we've graduated 8, and at this higher level, you're like, that doesn't sound like a lot, right? If I multiply that by the number of programs, like how many teachers are we really serving? Those are the questions that I get asked. Those are the questions that we have to respond to at a higher level. But it's important to understand that to do this well and to do this right in a way that for the long game is sustainable, that is developing a community of people who are well prepared and can serve today's students. That's the approach that we're taking, and that's what we want to see happen nationwide. These folks represent a lot of that work, but we need expansion. So what would you say to that in terms of what the role of the federal government would be, or even what you would suggest given your work with Teach Plus?
Absolutely, we need expansion. So the role of the federal government is to have your back in that work and to think about how we force multiply that in more places, right? Because 15 is not, it's relative to the demand, that can seem like it's not, we're not where we need to be, but each one of those educators will transform lives. Will be helping to decide what the future of our country looks like. That future is being decided today in our classrooms, whether we want to own that or not as a country. We believe we have to, our administration believes we have to own that. This is why, and it's our Grow Your Own programs, it's our deeper teacher residencies, it's opportunities to engage and build stronger pipelines within our ed prep programs, our higher education institutions and others. So what we have in front of us today, fortunately, is a president who cares deeply about that work. We are advocating actively. We were, and the secretary was testifying in front of Congress just this week about this agenda, right? We've proposed nearly $3 billion in funding before Congress to support programs, everything from our Teacher Quality Partnerships grant at the department to our support of the Augustus Hawkins program, which is specifically to support teacher pathways at some of our historically black colleges and universities and our Hispanic serving institutions, to our support for Title II of the Every Student Succeeds Act and upping our game there, to also thinking about, we have a program at the federal level called the EIR program, which is a program that looks at building, testing, validating, and scaling evidence-driven programs and solutions in our education system. And we have a proposal before Congress to utilize $350 million of that program specifically for improving teacher recruitment and pathways and retention, and building models like Grow Your Own models. So we're impressing on Congress the importance of this work. That's the first thing, right? And the second thing is putting to use the dollars that we have in the system now. I mean, I've worked on these issues for many years and fought many a budget in the Senate and sitting from the White House too, and advocating alongside teacher leaders toward that end in our state houses. I've never seen a moment where we have $122 billion, fortunately through the American Rescue Plan, thanks to the work of those in Congress that supported that, to help our communities recover and from this pandemic. These dollars can be put to use and should be put to use to meet some of our teacher challenges, our shortages, and also to help deepen our investments in how we prepare and attract our next generation of teachers. So we've put forth dear colleague letters. The secretaries said our colleges and universities that have $40 billion at their avail to support higher education could join with our districts to create more opportunities to surge our teacher candidates and support them in this moment. We want to see those dollars put to use by our state leaders and our local leaders toward these ends. And we're seeing places, in Tennessee, and we're seeing places in Indianapolis and other places that are utilizing those dollars in the here and now to support a stronger teacher pipeline and to support our teachers in growing their knowledge in their field. And boy, we need that today, because we can't afford to lose any more of our precious resources out of our system in the moment we're in.
So is there, part of what New America does and others, why we have this group, it's to bridge this gulf between what is sort of national and what's actually happening out in the field. Is there advice that you might give to folks here about what they might do in their own communities or in communicating? We just had a writing workshop a little earlier about op-eds, like how do you get your message out? How do you communicate to folks at different levels to make the case or to explain what's important in their communities?
The first thing I would say to that is that you are the engineers of the evidence base that is being built today for how we should build this profession. So what I would leave you with is, please consider that and take that task seriously. Think about how you're researching, documenting, and sharing the practices in your respective programs that are working, because that's a new playbook at the federal level, and you may have been doing this work for many years, and hopefully you have the support and the wind of other local leaders and state leaders at your sails. But at the federal level, we have been stuck for multiple decades now, as Elena can attest to, with still kind of the same playbook on how we're supporting teacher policy. We need a new playbook here, and Grow Your Own Programs has to be part of that. We're only going to get there if you're helping to build that evidence base. The second thing I would say is our stories matter, right? This is the work I used to do with our teachers, to say, like, your voice matters. It matters to policymakers. The challenge is that we're not all bilingual. We're not all proficient in being great teachers or being great leaders in growing teachers. We're not bilingual with that and with how to talk to policymakers in ways that move budgets and move legislation and move change. So let's try to get there, and let's also think about how we bring the stories of our educators and our own stories to bear, because again, like, this is the work of nation building, right? And those stories are what move policymakers, right? They often hear things aren't working. They don't always hear, here are the solutions, and let me tell you about, this candidate that I am working with right now who is going to change the face of what his or her community looks like through their example.
So you said bilingual, and you used the term in a different way than you would immediately think. So a lot of the folks here are trying to develop teachers who are bilingual teachers or multilingual teachers through paraeducator pathways, through high school pathways, through various pathways. The bilingual educator workforce, the special educator workforce, are two areas that this community is trying to develop and build, among others. But I point to those two because those two represent a growing, in number and complexity, two populations, student populations. We focus a lot of our attention here at New America on those populations. We try to see through the lens of those populations. Curious to know, since you said change the playbook, if there's anything in the mix that might address that specifically, those student populations and the educators that would serve them.
Yes, and let me just thank and acknowledge New America for using your voice and raising your voice consistently for those populations. Even before, our administration talks actively about the importance of a more racially and linguistically diverse teaching force. And we have prioritized supporting our teachers to better meet the needs of our students with disabilities. But those have not always been at the center of the conversation nationally. New America has always brought those conversations into the discussion. So I am really grateful for that. In terms of our special education, bilingual education, and STEM, historically have been shortages that, I think we see upwards of 150 pieces of legislation introduced across state houses, state legislators, every year around teacher shortages. A lot of them have those populations in mind or name them. But the challenge is that we have not built the solutions, the programs, the investments, or marshaled the will here at the federal level to do better there, more intentionally do better there. For our special educators, that has been growing our IDEA Part D program, which is one of the largest increases in investment that we have seen in that program in this most recent budget that the president just rolled out 2 months ago. And we're really proud of that because we want to be real partners with our states and with our other leaders at the local level in growing a new generation of special educators. And we want to be sure that our curriculum and the candidacy experience and the clinical experience of all of our educators reflects a greater depth in preparing our teachers to succeed in meeting the needs of our students with disabilities. So we're trying to bring a lot of those lessons forward. We're trying to do more to provide a diverse clinical experience for our teachers in those settings. And for our bilingual and multilingual teachers, right, we have to acknowledge our English learner community, our community of emergent bilingual learners continues to grow around the country. And we have really stagnated, unfortunately, at the federal level in investments to support bilingual teachers. We used to have, I'm going to date myself, but 21 years ago, we had a Bilingual Education Act that invested over $170 million, just in supporting career pathways for our paraprofessionals to gain certification and leadership in second language acquisition, and to support graduate fellows, and to support pathways to that end. And those were, and we had a set of model programs that the department connected with regularly and convened to support building that knowledge base. We don't have that anymore, right? And we've gone in the wrong direction there. So we've proposed a 35% increase in funding for Title III, which is now our formula dollars to support our multilingual learners. But we're also looking to prioritize new programs coming through the department in ways that more intentionally grow our bilingual educators. And I will ask you to stay tuned for more opportunities that you will see in the coming months where we will be much more intentional about how to support the dollars we do have today toward that end.
Thanks. And so I know people are going to have questions, so I'm going to stop so folks can ask questions in a minute. But you had mentioned research briefly, and we have not only practitioners here, folks that are university administrators and deans and people from districts and community-based organizations, but also folks who do the research that undergirds this.
Right.
And that is something that is also falls in the federal government's domain.
Yes.
What would you say in terms of the expansion of research to support this kind of, or funds to support research? I know there's obviously IES. Is that where you'd look? I mean, what is your vision for how the federal government would support research?
Yeah. Well, I think I'll give you my personal perspective here, Elena, which is that what animates me in the work always is how are we bridging the gap between practice, policy, and research and knowledge. And we're still not there as a country in doing that. We have to practice that, not just here in Washington, we have to practice that in all of our communities. Because every day there's a tremendous amount of knowledge that's being generated that we're not capturing and learning from. Every day there are conversations about how our system is being formed or transformed or changed, including how we're investing in that system through our budget, that lacks voice from those other pieces. And every day our teachers are doing the real work of meeting their learners where they are and helping them grow to their full potential. So let's try to connect all of those in everything we do more actively. That does mean we need to invest more in IES. We do need to invest more in large-scale studies that demonstrate what works around teacher preparation and around teacher effectiveness and success. We still have not gotten there as a country. You know, I look back to the National Commission on Teaching in America's Future, which was shaped, you know, well over 20 years ago, and still has a lot of the tenets of the clarion call of who should we be, how should we be orienting and grounding ourselves as a country around building the teaching profession. But I think we need more on that. We need more specifically also on unpacking the prep and the pedagogical knowledge that our teachers need to bring, particularly for our populations of students with disabilities and our emergent bilingual learners, but also just in terms of how we're connecting and unpacking learning and engagement and content for students. So there's just so much to learn even from the last 2.5 years of this pandemic. I mean, I saw as I visited with our teachers, like their ability to kind of adapt in real time their pedagogy remotely, to connect with their learners, to take a look at that grade level standard and determine what are those power standards. They just needed the permission to be able to do that, but to be able to then say, all right, here's where my kids are, to be able to get that diagnostic baseline and modify their instruction. So we got to capture that learning, because that learning is relevant not just for, you know, educating through the Great Disruption. It is relevant for, like, how do we differentiate teaching and reach every learner over the long term.
Okay, I have other questions, but I'll open
Yeah.
it up so that folks have a chance to ask questions if you have them. Feel free to raise your hand and we'll bring you a mic if you have a question. I'm going to keep going with my question. Feel free to raise your hand if you have one. The relationship between recruitment and retention is strong. They're obviously two different things, but they're very strong. So if we can't retain our teachers if they don't have good working conditions. We can't grow teachers if they can see that that's what they're going to go into. Right. Nobody wants to become a teacher if you look up and the teacher's job doesn't look sustainable or like something that you would want to do. In one of the conversations we had just today, but we've had the same conversation before, one of the things that came up is, okay, well, you try to get teachers in, and there's, even for, not only even, especially for the paraeducators, there's a sense of, these are my words, not others, but exploitation, where they're expected to do things. They're expected to translate. They're expected to step up. They don't get paid more to do it. They don't even really get honored for doing it. It's just supposed to be what they do. That's a bit of a trap and even, that's not just a structural problem, it's a cultural problem. That's what we do, and that's how we treat paraeducators. But it's also how we treat teachers, and we were talking about this earlier, like people don't really love their jobs right now as teachers. It's really hard. Hopefully there are pockets of excellence and happiness, but by and large it's a tough spot right now, and not just because of the pandemic. So what would you say to, I know you know this, right? We're trying to get more teachers in, but when you think about the different layers of people, educators and support educators and all the folks in schools that are really trying to do right by children and families, how do we get more people to want to do that? What structures do we change in order to ensure that they would want to even be there?
Right.
That's a hard question, I know.
Well, and there's no silver bullet, certainly, right? It is about, but it begins with where you begin here, of saying, like, recruitment and retention are connected here, right? Like, this is not just about, let's make sure we're mounting the best communications campaign so that young people understand that teaching is a viable option. We have to talk to them. We have to open those pathways early. But they're paying attention to what the profession looks like, what the state of the profession looks like, and they are paying attention to the reserves that our teachers have tapped over the last 24 months their own reserves in every way. So what we do believe there's a role for policy to play and a role in helping to meet other systems and leaders that are thinking about what are the norms around teaching in their respective schools, and what is the structure that we need to build that is more intentional about growing the professional learning and success and the leadership of their teachers, right? And that leadership growth means that that leadership has to reach beyond four walls. It has to be about principals being coached and supporting distributing that leadership among some of their best teachers and differentiating our roles in a classroom or in a school, rather, in terms of how our teachers advance and how they learn from one another and how they collaborate and how they examine one another's practice in low-stakes environments, not in environments that are about like, okay, I'm going to rake you here and then here's your dollars, but in environments where they are spending time in lab, learning, leading with one another, refining their practice. I mean, this is what you see it in practice. Had to go to Singapore to see it in practice, but it's there. You can see this. So that's one disruption, and we have some investments that we have proposed on teacher leadership and educator leadership, and the president's spoken to this in ways that we think could be particularly powerful there. The second thing that I'll pull out there, and again, no silver bullet, but mentorship and relationships matter. I mean, this is the work you're doing around preparing our future educators and growing them from their community. The beauty of that is that you're centering relationship in that work, right? They have a level of confidence, competency, connection to their community, but those relationships, once they're in the profession and in their buildings, matter. And if they don't have that mentorship, the depth of that mentorship, both in terms of practice, but also that fellowship, right? And I was just in a fellowship with a group of 50 outstanding Black and Latino male educators over the weekend on Saturday who've built their fellowship from the ground up. And, you know, the importance of creating that space to address some of that invisible tax that, for instance, our teachers of color and some of our paraprofessionals have to pay around being tapped to be disciplinarian and chief communicator for the entire school, and you know, and lunch duty and everything else. You know, there's a sacrifice there that folks pay relative to their professional growth and learning. So that fellowship, that mentorship is needed. I believe it's needed for all of our teachers, especially all of our new teachers. It's especially needed for many of our teachers of color who pay the invisible tax each day and the system is not acknowledging that at large.
I think we have a question. Do we have someone with a mic back there? Thanks, Riker.
Thanks. You just referenced Indianapolis, and we're a couple of Hoosiers over here, so
All
I'm
right.
just curious what
Excellent.
specifically...
I'm a Midwesterner myself, as you know.
Just curious what made you say that.
Well, so, I mean, I think, and again, there are a lot of examples to pull from, but I was impressed by the fact that the district chose to utilize some of their ARP expenditure to provide some bonuses and some compensation, which again, some additional compensation, which again, you know, we have a long way to go, and I used to work a lot in Indiana with Representative Boehning and others in that state house to make the case for raising teacher salaries to where they need to be. And there's a lot of work there that still needs to be done. But at the moment, choosing to spend some dollars to value and support our teachers in our districts, I'd love to see more of our teachers, more of our district leaders do that.
Did you want to take a minute and introduce yourself and what program you're for, instead of just Hoosiers?
Yes.
Sure. I'm Katie Lash. I'm the director of an East Central Educational Service Center. So we serve a school consortium, and then I'm here with Jeremy, and he can speak.
Jeremy Eltz, I'm Director of Rural Education at the Center of Excellence in Leadership of Learning at the University of Indianapolis.
Thank you. Thanks for all you're doing to grow our rural teaching force, too.
Any other questions folks have?
Hi, I'm the Go Blue.
All
Did my
right.
undergrad at the University of Michigan in elementary education, my master's at Western Michigan, and then my PhD in teacher mental health and emotional resilience at the University of Minnesota.
Wonderful.
So I am the program coordinator for our Minnesota Grow Your Own Teachers program at the U of M. And I really loved what you said. I have to look at my notes here, where you said, you're right, a teacher's role is to value, see, hear, and lift children. I love that. So my question is, though, since we desire our teachers to mirror and model to students that they are of value, how is our policy mirroring and modeling to our teachers that they are valued, seen, listened to, and that we was lifted?
Lifted.
So the
right.
question is, how are we doing for teachers what we're expecting them to do for children at the policy level? So maybe just one, and I'm a person who goes, it's a philosophical question, but I am deeply curious, not from a point of like defensiveness, of just like, can you give just one example
Yeah.
of how at the policy level we are actually practicing the reverence for educators that we expect them to practice to children if we're, you know what I mean? Is that a,
I know exactly what you mean.
Okay.
I think it's a brilliant question. And there's various policy levels here, right? There's the state level, there's the local level. So much of our, just for context, many of you know this, like our federal level, we are less than 10 cents on the dollar. So, but we have not had historically a federal policy, I'm going to speak at the national level, that has matched those values. We haven't had it. And it's time to change that, right? This goes to the blueprint I'm saying. Like we need a new blueprint for how we practice that in real time. We are, there are programs here at the federal level that we have chosen to double down on to try to do more of that, right? So we are trying to support in our Teacher Quality Partnerships Grant, which is the latest round of dollars to some of our higher education institutions around Ed Prep. Prioritize programs we know work in developing a deeper induction and a deeper residency experience for our teachers, because we know that the dollars and the time and the resources you spend on the front end preparing our teachers for success, those pay dividends and signal how important they are once they get into the classroom. But that's not going to do it on its own, right? And the modest investment we have isn't going to do it on its own either. It's got to be also about raising that compensation. I mean, and every state has work to do there. There's great resources. Other researchers have looked at how to rank the states in terms of compensation. But as a country, we have to do more to lift that compensation up. As a country, we have to do more to provide a mentor for every teacher. That should be a national goal that we're trying to drive toward. So a lot more to do in building those systems. And my worry is, we have a lot of talk and a lot of connection to how we build a stronger education system for our future. We have to center our teacher development and teacher support and teacher advancement in that, because that's at the heart of it. I will share with you a fact sheet that we released this morning alongside the Secretary's remarks that provide some examples of how we're doing that in our administration, provide some opportunities for how to use ESSER to do that more, our ARP dollars. But we need this chorus, this room to help demand a stronger blueprint there.
Thank you.
It's true, the 10 cents on a dollar in terms of the federal government, but perhaps the loudest voice. And so that's why
Yes, the
it is
bully
so important
pulpit.
that the messaging come from national. I think and related, because I see your hand, Dave, there is a tension between teachers as essential workers, which we saw in the past couple of years, but they always have been, they're essential, and professionals. Like there's sort of a strange tension in there, and we see that play out all the time. So teachers as workers, of course, means that there has to be alignment between the U.S. Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Labor. And so, David, do you have a question?
That's true.
Thank you for being here today. I want to start with that. Also a native Michigander, so there's that as well. But David Allenson, National Center of Grow Your Own, but right before I started this, I was the Chief of Human Capital with the Tennessee Department of Ed, so led the Grow Your Own and registered apprenticeship. So
Thank you for your work there, David, too. I'm talking about that work in as many corners as I can.
Thank you.
It's really a great model.
And so Elena read my mind, and I also want to say, if it wasn't for New America, they actually were one of the first people to commit to signing a national letter of support for our application. So eternally grateful to Elena and Amaya for that. I was just kind of curious, in that world, is there anything you can speak to about the Registered Apprenticeship for Teaching and potential technical assistance? I also want to say thank you to Secretary Cardona for calling for all 50 states about 10 weeks ago to set one up.
Yes.
Since then, I've personally met with about 29 state education agencies. My phone is ringing off the hook. I am so excited for you all to use your bully pulpit. And so I am just a nerd and a geek and would love to hear what the future plans are. So thank you for all of your work.
Oh, thank you, David. And thank you for taking all of those calls from your peers and your former peers and colleagues. We are really excited about this. And that's not to say that our apprenticeship model has to be the single model, but it is a great way for us to think about how we're connecting with our communities and giving them the opportunity to join the profession and bring their talent and their expertise. We have a working group right now with the Department of Labor that some of my staff are working through, and have had some conversations with our chiefs. Talked a lot to Penny about this directly. So I will say stay tuned. I think you will see, even beyond the call that we have made, more that we're trying to put into practice now and into works to help meet states' aspirations. I've been really encouraged. I wasn't sure what we would get when we first said we need to be doing more of this. And I've heard personally of over 20 states, not quite at 28, 29, that's great. We are not, at the federal level, we're not at a place where we set the licensure standards. But if we can get our colleagues at the Department of Labor to agree to some models, model agreements, model policies that on a voluntary basis states can opt into, and we can come alongside that and make sure that quality stays at the heart of that, which is another thing I am I'm attentive to right now in terms of the quality piece, because our apprenticeship models are not all made equal. So we need to be sure that that experience does justice to the preparation that our teachers need. But I think it could be a real avenue to surge and support our workforce. So excited to delve into that more. Yeah, and more to come, and I would love to connect with you following this just to keep you posted.
Hi, I'm Laura Mogelson. I'm from the University of Minnesota. What are your thoughts on some trends we're seeing across the country of the deprofessionalization of teaching and teacher preparation, which is sort of antithetical to what a lot of our work is, which is around high quality teacher preparation, investment of time and energy into growing educators?
Well, look, I think we owe our young people and our learners deserve a high standard of quality in how we prepare all of our teachers. So we believe that has to be at the heart of any policy. Any federal policy, you're not going to see a shortcut from our perspective around how we address this work. I think you have seen some places that have tried to accelerate. And I've seen, and I'm not going to name names, but there are states that have gone way down just to be able to, and you'll talk to them and they'll say, well, I don't have a teacher shortage here, I'm good. And you'll talk to some of the teachers and you'll realize like, that's not an individual that's staying with the profession or that's really equipped for success. So, I mean, I think we have to center quality. That doesn't mean that quality has to be a one-size-fits-all approach. And I think this is the other challenge is we've had such a, I think it's been a, if I go back, and I know you have great perspective, you spent a lot of years working on these issues. There was a dichotomous kind of, you are either in a traditional teacher certification program at an IHE, or you are in an alt route. And usually that was like one or two different alt routes. And so then there was like a little, so I also think we need to break away from that because the future of the profession is going to be attracting talent, diverse, commitment, culturally competent, community-based, community-rooted individuals who care, who have service in their heart, right? That is at the heart of every educator, but also wants to seek and be fulfilled in a profession and grow and lead in a profession. So we have different avenues to try to get there. I mean, I would love to see more reciprocity to a higher standard across the country. This is a moment where as teachers are moving, and we have models, the military model has been a reciprocal teacher licensure model for many years. We have places we can learn from there. We can think about how we support our Grow Your Own programs, how we support our residencies. They are more expensive, and our teachers are more effective in them and are staying in the profession longer. But we also can't lose sight of the changes, the structural changes that the profession needs to make and that our schools need to make in our districts. So as we're building the ed prep piece, and as you think about how do we think about the profession and lifting that up, we need a coalition of leaders, state level and local level leaders that are saying like, oh, I'm going to make changes so that this is not a one-size-fits-all experience for our teachers. There's time for collaboration. There's time for looking more deeply at data and utilizing data more actively to respond to the instruction. We have more educator-led and driven solutions at the local level. And that career pathway and trajectory is not just into the principalship or into the superintendency. All due respect for all my wonderful education leaders, including our outstanding Secretary of Education, who took that route from the classroom into the principalship, into the superintendency, into the being a commissioner. We also have wonderful teachers who want to stay in their classroom and teach. So let's give them the opportunity to do that.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Jason Modamedi. I'm a researcher at Education Northwest in Portland, Oregon. And I'm noticing there's I guess it's an observation that there's a disconnect currently between the federal sources of funding that a lot of the GYO programs are depending on, as well as what they're actually doing. So I'm thinking about, for example, 3, maybe 4 of the programs here have an Office of English Language Acquisition National Professional Development grant, building bilingual teachers, the like. And so, but one of the things that it takes to get that grant is a really strong university system, right? Writing those grants, is, anyone who's written one can tell you, is an incredible amount of work.
Yeah.
And takes an incredible amount of resource. Yet we know also that there's a whole bunch of programs in this room that don't have those resources, yet they're doing amazing work. Is there a way that the federal government can sort of bridge that gap, right? So that they don't have to meet all of those requirements, that they don't have to pay me $500,000 to do an evaluation that meets What Works Clearinghouse standards. That can we bridge that gap between practice and research in another way?
Yeah.
So,
There's a lot of snapping and clapping around that one.
I see that. I like that challenge, Jason. I think that's a good challenge for us to take on. A couple just reflections I'll offer there. I mean, I think we have some statutory pieces that need to be addressed here, right? Like I think our National Professional Development grantees from Title III are excellent and exemplars. Yeah, I've had the chance to visit with them just a couple months ago when they all came here to DC. It was great. I think they're doing great work. That cannot be the only grant program and opportunity that we have for our GYO programs or for our other community-based programs. I do also think we can do more to think about evidence building and evidence development in other ways beyond the What Works Clearinghouse. That is an important standard. It's not the only standard. You will hear us continue to say that. And there, we have a notice out right now in the Federal Register. The grant review process matters. Who sits on those panels to review competitive grants in the department matters. So I would love to follow up with you and give you a link to some changes that we have proposed as an administration in that process to try to diversify that pool of peer reviewers and to be more responsive to our diverse communities and how we think about the grant-making process.
I look forward to all the follow-ups that you're going to be giving to individuals because we
Yeah.
have a shared Google Drive and they're all
Oh,
going
there
to
you
go
go.
right in there.
You're
So
going to
everyone
you're going to
has
send me an
access.
email
Yes,
with all
of
those
course.
reminders.
We are, right?
Elena's like Ravenwell.
I think we have time for maybe one more question. Anyone have a burning question? Otherwise, I will ask. Oh,
Yes.
Amaya has a burning question.
I guess I'm just curious, and this is ironic because we're at New America, but the issue of college affordability really matters also for these programs. A lot of them are funded with unstable funding, and so they can't always commit to candidates because they can't guarantee that they're going to be able to sustain them for the 3-4 years it takes for them to earn a degree. And so I'm curious about your thoughts on the administration's goals around college affordability, the work that you all are doing at the department to kind of really address that issue, because it's sort of a crisis I think that we have right now that's kind of impacting pulling people into this profession and wanting them to not have to take on tremendous debt in order to become a teacher.
Yes.
We want free teacher prep.
Yes, we do.
There you go. And I'm glad you raised it because it's both the elephant in the room and also this conversation wouldn't be complete without that conversation, that discussion, because that access into the profession matters. The public service loan forgiveness changes that we've executed over the last year and a half have made a tremendous difference in terms of reversing the troubling trend that we saw where fewer than 4% of proposals for public service loan forgiveness were actually approved prior to our time, to being able to turn that spigot on and get over 128,000 additional public servants into that program for forgiveness. We believe that continues to be a really important lever, and that forgiveness after the fact is also not enough. We need more grant assistance, right? And so part of that is, and it's fitting for us to mark the 50th anniversary of the Pell Grant, right, which is still the #1 college opportunity down payment on success for over 6.4 million individuals. We have to continue to grow the Pell Grant while we're making these pathways more affordable. But we also have to grow Teach Grants, and we've proposed advancing and growing the Teach Grant. The Build Back Better plan included huge expansions of the Teach Grant. And I don't think we should stop there. I think there are other things we can do to provide pathways to more affordable options for our teachers to be able to enter the profession. And I would encourage New America to keep pushing us on free universal educator prep programs, because I think that's a beautiful vision. If we can get more of our pathways into higher education and through higher education more affordable, you know, our administration has long advocated for, and Dr. Biden has long advocated alongside the president, for free community college. We are not losing our resolve at continuing to press that forward in Congress. That can be a great down payment alongside you know, educator prep programs that have real expertise to helping prepare a new generation for our classrooms. So many different tools we need to bring to that, but a very important conversation. And you know, as I talk to a lot of young people who are thinking about the profession, who might be first generation college goers and college graduates, you know, let's give them the option to come in, you know, let's give them that incentive to be able to come into teaching. We have to do better there.
Just on the community college point, that to pull those together, we're doing work here on community college baccalaureate programs, others are as well, and that's a really key lever there, because if you can do that, that's where people are going to school. That's what they can access, that's what they can afford. So we have to stop now just because of time, but personally, I'm so happy to see you, and so thank you for being here. And just on all other levels, we really appreciate you taking the time to come here, share everything that you're learning. Questions I didn't use, a binder you clearly didn't use. So, but anyway, this was a wonderful conversation. Thank you for engaging everyone. Can we just a round of applause?
Thank you.